Using slicers to filter data in pivot tables and charts is both an efficient and elegant way to filter your data. You'll notice on the far left there's an Excel formatted table. That table is the source data for a pivot table. The pivot table is the source data for a pivot chart. And the chart is a pivot chart, meaning it's not based on the table on the left, it is based on the pivot table. So if we filter that pivot table, we'll see a corresponding change in the chart. And then on the far right, we have two slicers, one for region and one for quarter. So if you look at the data in the pivot table, in the region column, you'll see east, north, south, and west. Now look at the slicer. That's what you see there. If you look at the pivot table in the quarter column, for quarters 1, 2, 3, 4, we see that. And that's what you have on the slicer on the far right. And so the slicers can be used to filter the data in the pivot table, and then you'll see the corresponding change in the pivot chart. So I'm going to show you how to use those slicers to filter this pivot table. So I'm going to filter this pivot table, and the way we would normally do that without using slicers is we would go here to this button. And let's suppose we want to see east. Well, we know that we unselect this and we put a check in east, click OK. We can see east. And our chart updates as well. We're looking at east. If I want to see north, I go back here, take the check out, and I put it back in north and click, and then we see north. And suppose I want to see just Q1 and Q2. Well, I have to deselect all. I'm going to select Q1 and Q2, click OK. And then that's what we have. So we see north, Q1 and Q2, and our chart is updated accordingly. So I'm going to clear these, and we're going to do the same thing using the slicers. Now, the slicers, these are buttons. You simply click on them. So the first thing we did is we filtered for the east region only. So I'm going to go to the region slicer and click on east. And what happened? We filtered the pivot table for east region. And that's what we see. Our chart updates accordingly. Next, we wanted to see north. So I'll click the north button. And that's what happens. And notice that's exactly what's going on here. When I click the north button in the slicer, it is filtering for north. The same process we did here, much simpler to do using the slicer. If I want to clear this, I would go back here and notice that there's a filter button in the corner, has a red X, which means that this is filtered and you need to clear it to see all data. And so if I click that, we see everything. I click north, I see just north, and I can deselect. Now, I could go here and select Q1, and I see Q1, Q2. So what was the third step we did a moment ago? We wanted to see north, but just for Q1 and Q2. And the way to do that with the slicer is I'll click first on Q1, and then I'll hold my control key and click again on Q2 and let go. And now I have north, Q1, Q2, and the chart is updated accordingly. The slicers make it very easy, very efficient to filter my data in the pivot table and the pivot chart simply by clicking buttons. When I want to clear the filters, I click the filter button with the red X, and I'm right back to the beginning with all of my data shown. I suggest that you learn how to install slicers and how to use them in your pivot tables and pivot charts.